All right, welcome everyone to episode 24 of Caster Calls with ZombieGrub. I am here with the one and only Tasteless. As the job's over, the end of the year is here, and both of us actually have nothing to do now, but for too long, I guess. The StarCraft 2 season is always seemingly always in season, but anyhow, we finally got together. I'm so excited to talk to you, Tasteless. It's always good to see you as well. We haven't talked in a while.
I know. Since the pandemic, I have hardly seen anybody, so it's good to catch up with you here on the show. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think it's going to be an awesome one. I had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun in every single episode, basically. Everyone has like really interesting perspectives, but it was actually like so long ago, back like one of the beginning episodes. I was talking to oh my god, Paper Thin. What's his
Clinton.
yeah, Clinton, there we
Yeah,
go. I kept on thinking Creighton. I was like, no, that's not the right one.
a
So
different
yeah,
different bald caster in Korea. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. But yeah, and he mentioned that you guys actually talk a lot about casting, and I was like, "Oh man, I can't wait to get Tasteless, on the podcast." And here we are, like, gosh, like 6 months later. I started this right after I got back from Katowice. So, anyways, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, most people, of course, listening to this are StarCraft fans, so they kind of have the general idea of who Tasteless is. But let's hear it from your mouth, as I guess. Like, what was the start of your casting career, and how did you really get sucked into it?
I was a competitive StarCraft 1 player. And I got to the USA finals a couple times. So top 16 or top 12 depending on how the format was set up. And then um basically I got eliminated by my brother in New York. I can't remember which year that was. Maybe 2005, I'm not sure. And they had a guy who was a stage host who knew all the games but StarCraft, and so he wasn't comfortable talking about StarCraft in front of an audience and stuff. So I offered to go up there and do that with him. And then I sort of conned my way into getting more and more work like that. I didn't really view it as early on as me wanting to be I mean, there weren't casters basically. Excuse me. There weren't casters at that time. So what I was more interested in doing was getting a free trip somewhere, getting to meet other pro gamers, getting to watch Korean pros play in person. So after that, I did some work in Singapore for the World Finals for WCG, and then I just picked up, maybe 2 or 3 gigs a year. I would skip classes in college and go to these events and get paid a small amount of money, but they pay for my hotel and my flight and stuff. And then eventually, there was a job opening in Korea for a TV network called Arirang TV, which I think most people probably don't know about, but it's like an English language kind of generic TV station in Korea. It's about stuff in Korea. So they were looking for somebody that had some experience in commentary, and I had some friends already living in Seoul, and so they hooked me up with those people, and that's how I ended up moving out to Korea. And I've been out here for I think 13 years. And so yeah, I mean, I think as far as the StarCraft 2 stuff, everybody knows I do GSL and all that.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, when you're, back when you first, decided to like go up and help that guy out, I mean, at that point, we're still talking about like Team Liquid writing down the builds of the 240p videos that they somehow got, no one
hmm
else could get access to. So, did you ever like consider casting before just like being like, oh, that guy doesn't know, I'm going to get up there? Or was there anyone that you looked at who was actually providing commentary?
No, no, it was a completely um it was just sort of a weird situation, basically, because I got paired against my brother. It was like 3 months of prep to then kind of lose to the guy that I was prepping with the whole time. And I lost outright. So there was no losers bracket or anything. So I just wanted something to do. Um, and I mean, I enjoy talking about the game. So I just sort of I early on I kind of fell into it, but the moment that I finished the broadcast, I kind of realized, oh, there's people working at this event. It hadn't really occurred to me up until then. I guess there's people that are paid to run these things, and this is a job. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe, I was still a college student. I was probably going to go to grad school and try to get like a higher education in philosophy. But I just thought, oh, maybe this is like a thing I can do to make a living, casting or working in esports or something like that.
Right. And there was just like, most people that I talk to, they're like, there's some background information about commentary, whether they started off watching StarCraft 2 and you were in Artosis, literally, or at least coming in a few years into the esports world around 2012. So they have like this kind of like base expectation of esports commentary. But you come in and you just have like you have nothing that you're modeling yourself after. You don't think about the sports broadcasting that you hear in the radio. You just really get up there and you're just like, well, I guess this is what people want to hear about.
Well, I mean, I the first time I was basically just on stage kind of saying what the races are trying to do to each other, like Terran wants to try to push and kill the Zerg and stuff like that. When I got to Singapore, I got to meet DJ Wheat and a few other the very, very early casters. Like back then they'd call themselves shoutcasters. Um, and I would say the person who had the most influence on me would be DJ Wheat, who is a higher up at Twitch now. But he just had like the broadcaster chops. He knows how to talk. Um, I was very green back then, so I was looking up to him a lot, and he was definitely mentoring me. Um, but I mean, I think some of the job at the time was just can you be on camera and not say something completely inappropriate? That a lot of people can't be trusted to just go on camera and talk, and so I think because I wasn't gonna say anything really foolish or make the company look bad, I kinda got in that way, but as time passed, I mean, when I got to Korea and started getting a really regular work, I started thinking more about, like, what what was the culture like that I grew up with around StarCraft, and also what kinda shows do I enjoy and why do I enjoy them? Even not gaming related. Why do I enjoy stuff? And then I try to implement that into my work.
Yeah. So what were you thinking about? I mean, most people, I would say, you guys brought in this air of you, and then you guys being you and Artosis brought in this just like air of two good friends having fun talking about StarCraft, and you could bring the analysis when it was necessary, but it's a lot about an actual show, as opposed to just this is a cast. So is that something that you identified early on through like listening to comedy podcasts or
Um
variety shows or what?
I mean, the thing with Dan is that we're like the way that we are on camera, we're like that off camera. That's our sense of humor. And so, we did a lot of little casting gigs around the country and some online stuff. Um, and whenever we tried to be funny, even if we didn't think what we did was that funny, the feedback was quite good. And I just never felt like it was disrespectful to make jokes during the cast. Also, growing up, all the people I knew that played StarCraft had a really good sense of humor. I think because the game was already so old, even then, if you were playing competitively, it was sort of absurd. It was only popular on any professional level in Korea. The game's hard, and nobody's really actually making any real money. I mean, the only players that made money, like enough money to make a living outside of Korea, were like Ukrainian players and some Polish players because um, at that time, especially, like a $500 sponsorship a month would go a long way. Just with that kind of money goes a long way out there. So, Dan mentioned this to me a long time ago, but a lot of StarCraft players back then had kind of gallows humor, like a dark sense of humor. And we found that if we made jokes and had fun, and people just had fun with it, as long as it was also still very StarCraft oriented.
Yeah. So it wasn't really, a concentrated effort as much as it really was just like that's what you're going to your be like, and then people are like, "Oh, we like that." So you
Yeah,
just got
well,
that feedback loop.
yeah, I mean, basically, it was weird because when the game first came out, it was sort of this crazy thing where we had been out in Korea for years and suddenly we actually have a show now. And this happens whenever you have any new show is suddenly people that also work there start to try to tinker with the broadcast or the way the show is or start telling you what to say and what to do or what not to say. And so we had a lot of issues with people working there early on until we sort of outlasted them. Um, and by then, like, all those people are gone; they're not working there anymore. And so we were sort of able to take creative control and try to make it in our vision. Also, with a lot of these Korean productions, they're so focused on the Korean end of it. They're basically just entrusting you with the responsibility of facilitating the show and knowing how to handle it. Because, like, when we first got picked up for GS, I told him because it costs a lot of money to have an English broadcast. So I said, you don't need writers, you don't need any of the other people that you would normally have to pay for to do this. We'll just take care of all of it. And
And I mean, you said they have writers for the Korean side?
yeah, yeah, they have writers that help with the storyline, people
Huh.
that go over stats. I mean, there's a lot of uh extra jobs. So like early on, especially when I was doing the StarCraft 1 stuff before StarCraft 2 came out, but at Goem TV, I basically just said, you don't have to worry about anything. Just slot me in with the makeup artists. Like I'll go in between the Korean casters and then you can just let me go because I've already done that. And so that way it didn't cost a lot, so it wasn't hard to justify to the people in charge of budget.
Yeah. I mean, people know that there's such a big difference with the Korean commentary just because of the very, apparent, like there are three commentators, right? And people are
Right.
always comparing us to that as well and saying maybe it's the best thing we could do that. And I don't know, I'll ask your opinion on that later. But to have writers involved with it as well is a bit surprising. I think one of the things that I've learned doing this podcast and looking at other esports is that I don't know about writers, but they do have a lot more people being pulled in to bring in like stats, for instance.
Right.
Um, especially if they do end up being these big productions like a Riot production. But for the Koreans, I guess to just be that's the standard. I mean, was that the standard for like the pro league casting as well, or do you not know much about
I
that?
don't know that much about that production. I mean, for instance, like we can get the stats now too. I mean, where GSL's at now, it's fine, right? I mean, we have better numbers than the Korean viewers even. So, um, but at the time, I'm not sure. There's a lot more people involved though early on. Like now, I can get the stats. If there's any important narrative they think that the Dan and me aren't going to know about, they'll let us know. Usually, we don't need it, but yeah, it's all there. I think a lot of Western esports has been more bare bones. Although, again, with like League of Legends, I don't know, for instance, what's involved with that.
There's a lot involved with it
It
actually.
seems
So
like it.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it feels like StarCraft 2 never really stopped being the grassroots scene, even though we've obviously like, had our fair share of developer and publisher input. That we still, don't bother to really form teams. Obviously you and Artosis do, but that's a different scenario. We don't have a lot of outside influence. We show up and basically, even if it's like a new producer or director, they're just like, oh, we love what you guys are doing. Just like keep doing it.
I think a lot very early on, I felt like when I was casting, a lot of people were trying to kind of modify the way that we casted or how we did it. And I know the enemy gave a lot of pushback everywhere to just kind of leave us alone because we know what we're going to do. So that also might be why now all the StarCraft 2 stuff sort of like that. It's sort of hands off, but
uh,
like I think the WCS casters are the best casters that there are, and I think it's in part because people are able to do an entire show by themselves and be ready and handle stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, that is a big part about being a StarCraft commentator is being able to kind of like do things on the fly, do things all by yourself. I
Yeah,
mean, I think all of us have had our fair share of the growing pains, the doing the weekly cups without any pay, having to observe and produce on our own, and we've all happily moved past that as we can, but we still get sucked into it every now and again because we just don't have the same setup as something like an Overwatch League as well, where it really is just like you guys are one machine part to this entire machine, and it's
well, also that I mean,
you do
like,
your
a game
job.
like Overwatch as well, it's not very cut and dry, right? Like that that's hard to observe. I know that for the
Yes.
whole first year, it was a nightmare for them to even figure out how to capture the game
Yeah.
correctly, and so I feel like luckily with StarCraft because we have that bird's eye view, things get a little bit easier.
And I think the pacing of StarCraft also really is quite for me it's the gold standard. It's obviously why I like StarCraft 2 above the rest, but when I watch the other pacing of the other esports, I just always think like especially when it comes to Overwatch, which is so darn fast. I'm like, "Oh, that's impressive." Like, it's impressive when you guys cast this, but also it's not really like it's not my jam, right? In StarCraft 2, we have our slow parts where we can talk like friends would talk about, just really weird stuff, random stuff. And then we have our really hype moments. We have our analytical moments, but that's why I've always liked the pacing the most. I think it really lets us shine in a very casual manner. But so
I
you
also think it's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
nope, go ahead.
I think also it's a little bit of a different uh, setup because you're telling a story almost the whole time. I mean, a game can be 5 minutes or 40 minutes, but you're trying to kind of capture the entire thing. Where like you take CS:GO for instance, it's very round oriented. Now there's still a bigger story within that, like who's going to win on Dust 2 or whatever. But I think there's a certain a tempo to a StarCraft cast. It's a little bit different from other games. And I think it's not as structured as like a League cast ends up being, because League ends up in a lot of the same repetitive cycles. Like they win a big fight, then they go for Baron. You know, they'll push this lane. StarCraft games can get into a lot of very unique situations.
Yeah. I mean, it goes hand in hand with both the game as well as the way that the game esport is being pushed as a whole. Like how the scene has grown. Was it a little bit more artificial? Was it more grassroots? You know, it's why there's a big difference between an Overwatch League broadcast. It's not just the game, but also because they were kind of modeling a bit more after traditional sports broadcasting, and something like a Smash Melee tournament, right? Like it's
Right.
going to be very, very different for multiple reasons. But you guys, eventually you and Artosis started, just casting so much together, doing the biggest event from the best region. You guys, of course, you're now known as, the world's best caster duo. So you guys, though, had to go through some of these pains of being the guys to do it kind of first with the second coming of esports, the one that actually hit the international scene. StarCraft 2 was the biggest thing and helped grow Twitch. And you guys were kind of leading the charge as some people who were, great casters, as well as, I think, brand minded. You're actually thinking about this as a job a bit more than the other guys who might be just getting like their first gigs, right, for those MLGs. So how did you guys direct yourselves in that landscape that was like 2010 to 2012?
So I guess it would be, there's two parts to it, right? So there was the whole goal to stabilize in Korea. I mean, we were sort of known in some esports circles in Korea, but it was like, you're trying to pick up odd jobs, and Koreans are very interested that, oh, there's some foreigners that are interested in StarCraft. A lot of Koreans didn't know that anybody outside Korea even knew about StarCraft. Um, but it was, the first part was us trying to get stabilized here, so get proper work visas, which means a company has to sponsor us. Get enough money that, like there was periods where I had to borrow money from friends because I just didn't have enough money. I wasn't making money. Um, and then getting proper pay, because the thing about doing anything on TV is some people make a lot of money, some people literally don't make any money. So it was about trying to prove our worth, and I think in that process we realized we have to treat ourselves as a package, because we both had experiences early on where like one, you know, they don't want to pay both of us well, or somebody says, well, why don't we just use you and not Dan, or vice versa. um there was other forms of triangulation early on, and we just sort of realized, okay, we have to just always meet people as a unit, because that way they either get all of us or they don't get anything. um and I mean, we're paid the same and everything like that, but it was basically to try to get that set up so that one of us doesn't get fucked over, you know? And so once we had that set up and we had GSL going, then the second step was to try to figure out, okay, how do we leverage this to secure other events overseas? And then how do we get them to pay us? Because then that's a whole other thing too, is that people weren't paying casters hardly anything back then either. So how do we convince these companies that we're worth that? Or how do we get them to give us an airline ticket that we think is good, where we're not transferring through 4 airports to get to some location? And so you kind of play each of the companies off each other, and then you find the one that you think is going to give you the best deal, and you push them the hardest, and then you can use that with the next company, and then the
Yeah.
next company, um, until eventually you have yourself padded. Then you come back to the Korean studio. You say, well, I've done every event in the world. Now you got to uh, pay both of us better. And then you kind of you push yourself into a position where you're safe. And so yeah, it was two parts. It was the Korea part, and then the second part was just kind of mapping out kind of overseas work, which is always a little bit different in each region. NA is a little bit different than Europe. Different Asian regions are a little bit different than NA or Europe. And so that was probably maybe 2.5 to 3 year process of us kind of trying to figure that out. but a big part of it was always doing this as a unit. So that way, if like a company says, "Oh my god, we don't want to pay both these guys," they go to Dan and say, "Well, let's just get you." He goes, "No." Or the same thing for me. We go, "No, we just won't do the event unless you get both of us."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, was that more about, making sure that you guys were helping each other out because you did, you work together so often, you were coming from the same place, or was that also entirely like which one? Because you guys knew that a duo brand was going to be more coveted. Like, is this you actually were like, okay, a duo is the most powerful thing that we can offer, so we should really push this, or was it just more of like a, oh, I don't wanna let, Artosis be left back in Korea.
Well, it was both. It was
Mm,
totally both. Early on, there was a BlizzCon where they had hired my brother already, and then they wanted to hire me, but not Dan, for instance. And I just said, "Cut my." I mean, and Blizzard was not going to hire him. This is like really, really long ago. Okay, so like the first, this might have been like before StarCraft 2 was out, or like the year it came out. But I just said,
okay.
"Cut my pay in half, and I'll share a hotel room with Dan." And that was like one of the first months where it's like, no, we have to do it. And then once we get there, we can figure out the rest. But it was a combination of both. I mean, it, first of all, I love casting with other casters too. But one of the reasons why Dan and me cast together so much is we know how each other casts. So there's no weird problems. I've casted with a lot of people. I mean, obviously all the WCS casters are great, but I've like back in the day, I've cast with some people who would like text on their phone, like texting their girlfriend while there's a cast going on, or uh you get somebody's ego where they can't handle being wrong, or they talk over you. I've cast with people that have never made eye contact with me and just look at the game. And it's like it's a lot harder to work with people like that. So it was definitely a combination of both, but um yeah, I mean it was we wanted to make sure that we were both protected, and that way if the company really didn't get any part of us, if they didn't get both of us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just so interesting because you guys were pushing this more than anyone else that I can remember.
Yeah.
Inevitably people would pair up people like the NASL guys, Bitter Dam, because they cast so much, eventually became a bit of like an Archon, but never, the extent that you guys are. And then you guys are so ahead of the times as well, because right now the landscape of esports is that if any esport comes up, the companies are pushing for duos. They are looking at an analyst and looking at a play-by-play guy, and they're like, we're gonna put you together. And that's actually just something that is almost universal at this point amongst the bigger esports, not the more grassroots one, but even still, even amongst the like the tier two scenes and some of these big Overwatch, like the Overwatch League, they're also just like, yeah, we're going to test you out right now with these guys because we are going to then push you into that role. So it's very different. It was very ahead of the time, as I was saying, and it ended up doing wonders. Of course, ended up being very much worth it. But it must have been difficult, especially when other people weren't bothering to do the same thing. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but I imagine that most other people weren't like, okay, you got to bring Roddy if Mr. Bitter got brought along. I don't think that was happening, but you guys actually made sure to do it. Did you ever think that it wasn't going to pan out? Did you ever think like, oh, maybe we should really start letting ourselves divvy up from each other?
No, because that's when I think, broadcast companies start to screw their talent over pretty quickly, is when because all these companies at the end of the day want to get the most they can with spending the least amount of money. And so, no, I mean, we never really thought of kind of breaking up. I mean, for instance, Dan did Hearthstone for a while. I just did some PUBG a year ago. But like, I mean, our main gig is StarCraft. So, excuse me. No, we never thought about like breaking off. One thing that we both I think firmly believe is that like although Dan is probably viewed as more of like an analytical caster and I'm probably viewed as more of a play-by-play caster, we both think we can do both. I see a lot of other casters like end up pigeonholing themselves where they're like, "Well, I'm an analyst," and then the person who's an analyst can't fucking talk or use their voice or look into a camera, and then you get the guy who says, "Well, I'm the caster, I'm the host." Then this person doesn't know anything about the game. or they don't push themselves to know anything about the game. Um, or try to understand it on any kind of deep level. And so I know with Dan, we both kind of feel like we are both play-by-play casters and analysts, even though I
Okay.
think it's like I'm the guy that opens the show, so I guess I'm doing more hosting. I probably do a little bit more play-by-play than Dan. Dan can still play-by-play well. Dan probably viewed as more the analytical one, but I can analyze stuff and I can talk about strategy fine too. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of casters nowadays sort of get caught up in some role when if you're going to get good at this job, you have to basically be good at all of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been an interesting conversation point on this podcast is that, talking to people from different esports, most of them are coming with a background knowledge of some like StarCraft 2 or even coming from StarCraft 2 as many people did, but some of them are actually more new and then they're actually thinking the way that these companies are pushing it with the duo. So they're like, yeah, of course I would only push this one or that one. I'm going to be best of this one. And I've always thought it was interesting. I always ask my guests, like, do you think that duos are the best way? Which I'll extend to you. I mean, did you ever look at, the previous days of StarCraft 2 and go like, oh, they really like Bitterdam should have pushed harder, or Nate and Roddy should have pushed harder to be a duo because this is actually the best commentary that you can get because then you create such synergy with each other.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of what Dan and me figured out was kind of different because it was Wild Wild West back then for esports. Also, we really were doing a show every week out of a studio in a city that we live in, right? I mean, most people aren't doing that. So, um, I know that there was a period when I was a WCS caster where, like, if I wasn't with Dan, they would always make me cast with Roddy, and
Okay.
I was just eventually had to pull somebody aside and say, "You have to let me cast." If I first of all, I don't, it's not like I'm only going to cast with Dan, but I said Roddy's fine to cast with, but I want to cast with every other person here because by then the WCS casters it was pretty much cemented who's going to be there, right? And so then I'm like, okay, well it's better. I learn more if I cast with different people then. Um, but I guess in the early days, things were a lot more competitive. There was a lot more StarCraft tournaments. I don't know if doing duos was the way to do it or not. The other thing is that I had worked with Dan so closely, like for years before we even got GSL, that I really kind of understood him, and what he wanted, and he knew me and what I wanted. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it's fine to have duos. You should also not just be trying to compete and take out other casters. You should actually try to have, you know what I mean, like a kinship with them. I know each game, it's this casting scene is sort of different. They can be cutthroat, but I think if everybody's trying to lift each other up and help each other out, that's really important. So I don't know if I have a great answer for you with that one.
Yeah, it
Um,
kind of sounds like I mean, you guys were in the most, particular position for this. Because even though in towards the beginning of StarCraft 2, there were a couple of chances for duos to work together on a common show, like NASL was happening pretty frequently. The MLG, like Axel Toss and Axlav, were pretty frequent. Uh, I mean, I guess then at WCS, that's right, had their studio broadcast for NA and EU, if you remember that phase. There are
right.
chances for duos to be pushed, if they were like, we're only going to do this and we're only going to do that. But I think inevitably, 2020 now, it's like it's obvious that wasn't going to stick the same way that you and Artosis could stick. You guys are in Korea, working in the same city that you live in, but everyone else, I mean, when the WCS studios went all Europe, if Nate and Roddy had been very stubborn and been like, nope, this is it, can't go anywhere else, can't do anything else, they probably would have been worse off. I guess we don't know, but they might have been worse off. StarCraft 2 is a scene where you have to be able to work with other people and you have to be cool with other people too. So we
Yeah,
can't
for
be really
sure.
cutthroat.
The
Um,
grossest scenes are always right when a new game comes out, and like
yeah.
everybody, like zombies, that is in an unstable position, just goes to the new game. And I've done a bunch of different games. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like, oh man, nobody here wants anybody else to. They're all talking shit. Um, the game's new, so it's not clear that anybody really knows what they're talking about, but they're all pretty sure the other person's wrong, and I don't know, it can be a mess. I guess the biggest advantage for Danemy was just that we're in Seoul. I mean, even just for esports work, like it's not just Danemy out here working. There's like I think 8 other people that just commentate in English out here. and a few people that do it, off and on. But because this is a city where there were esports events every day, we're in lockdown right now because of COVID. But in a normal world setting, there's just enough work for a bunch of different games that people can kind of exist out here and pick up gigs. Um, and so that was another big factor for that as well. Where I think even though a lot of people that work in esports live in LA, I don't feel like LA is there yet with having enough stuff gaming related to where you can just be out there doing that. Um,
Agreed.
so I don't. I mean, I'm not sure where all the other cities are. I know there's a lot of people doing work out of Ukraine. Um, New York, not a good place for regular content. LA, not bad. Uh, and then I don't know about China. I don't know exactly what goes on in Chinese esports in some cases, but in English language stuff, it seems like Korea, and obviously if you speak Korean, Korean language stuff is quite good.
Right.
So that was a factor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also, we talk about the casting scene. It's a very obvious difference to the player scene. The fact that you can be in a country that isn't that large, and most tournaments going to happen in Seoul, maybe some in Busan or Daegu or something like that, but it's
Right.
a train ride, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually get to all these things that are happening. Where if you lived in America, you'd have to fly literally 5 hours to LA, and then get back to New York and whatever, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's beneficial for the player base. That's one of the reasons Korea's been so
It's
great in what
it's
they've
cheap
done.
too. I mean, I think a lot of people
Yeah,
don't factor this in. Like, yeah, like when the players come, like they take a taxi or they take the bus, and it's not like GSL has to house them. They have
yeah,
their own homes and everything. So I mean, the cost of doing a show like that is much more manageable. I mean, putting something on that even looks like a GSL pretty much anywhere else in the world for any other game is very expensive. You have to pay for flights, you have to put the players somewhere, then the players need handlers to get them around because they might not speak the language of the country or that they're in at that moment, or that they might not know the city, and then yeah, there's just so many other parts. So I think Korea is able to do a lot of this because there's so much esports here and because of the way the city's built and the country's built. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that's why I love visiting it, but it is just one of the cheaper places and easier places, having been
Yeah.
to a couple of different countries, to get around, even if you don't speak the language. Even if I didn't know Hangul, I feel like I'd still be able to get around totally fine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits to living in Korea. But I mean, of course, there is the downside. Like actually living in Korea is a bit more expensive than just visiting Korea, of course. But then also that there is such a there's only a few people who can really make this work. Living in Korea and actually getting a visa is actually very, very difficult and sometimes impossible. So we have people doing visa runs and just going over to Japan or back home for a little while and then coming back. So as much as there is work, it does feel like, that you said it, like 8 people doing English commentary out
Right.
there. Uh, how is that scene, I guess, developed over the years? Because League of Legends became so popular in Korea, and then PUBG is a very Korean centric esport at the very least. And I mean, do you still think that there's enough work for the 8 people? Or do you think there's going to be more in the future with like Valorant coming in, or is it really
I think
just
there's
like
going to be more work if I had to
okay,
guess. We'll see. I mean, yeah, I would definitely say yeah. I mean, StarCraft's still big, League's still big. PUBG, I know there's going to be stuff. I don't think it's been announced yet, but there's stuff that's going to be here next year. Um, and yeah, Valorant's a big question mark because it doesn't appear to be taking off yet. But Korea's sort of weird with trends where like it might suddenly pick up and be everywhere if it's on TV enough out here. Koreans tend to like catch on to trendy stuff very quickly, almost to a comical level. Like there was a summer out here where everybody had yellow shoes. Like a couple people had them, and then I'm walking around, and I remember thinking, "Oh, those look kind of cool. I should get them." And then it's like fucking everybody had. It was ridiculous, but
yeah.
that might happen with Valorant. There's some other games that are casted out here. Clash Royale gets English coverage. Um, so yeah, it seems like it'll continue to grow. It's kind of hard to penetrate
Mhm.
from an outside level, especially now because usually they the work goes to the people that are already here, right?
Right.
Or if it's done like with League of Legends, I know Riot handles that because they handle all their stuff in house. But
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like it should grow. I imagine these trends will start to pick up in other cities globally as well. But it seems like right now Seoul's ahead of the curve for that.
Yeah, I think so. It is really funny when you talk about trends though, because immediately I think of like the food trends in Seoul.
Yeah.
Like and sometimes they come over to America pretty fast as well. So I live in a Koreatown, and it just is like there's one year where it felt like everyone was eating waffles,
Yeah.
which are so popular, but it was like everywhere. And then now apparently there's like a hot corn dog fascination that I was
Yeah.
not expecting.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, there we go. Anyways, yeah, it's I mean, it's a wonderful city, but it is difficult to work in, especially because you also have to get used to the, some of the Korean structures of the Korean companies, which are going to be a bit different than Europe and North America. Now, I've spoken to a couple other people, and they say that it's not really as bad as it was. Is that true? Like when you work for a Korean company, are you really adapting to their preferences, or they just kind of like,
They have a different way of doing stuff out here. Like for instance, one thing that Korea's always been the best about is their rehearsals are fast and efficient. Like like a Korean rehearsal, what they do is you sit in a chair, they run through every camera shot in front of you on your screen and play every slide in the order. Like it's on fast forward.
cool?
Like but like other other production companies haven't figured this shit out yet. Like it's crazy. Like if I sit down and they go, okay, camera shot, they zoom in on me, right? Then they go goop, and then they have the 3 slides, boop, boop, boop. Then they before the game starts, they do the shot, the same GSL shots you see, right? The one where they pan it over like this, they zoom in on each player's face, they zoom in on the game, or we go into the game, then they type GG, then they show you all the shots after that, then we're done. So many places will make you actually rehearse like an intro for a show for the amount of time that the actual intro for the show is. So it'll be like
Yeah.
20 minutes, and it's like, well, there's just no need. And they want you to
Mhm.
have a pretend conversation. And so there's some things Korea's fast about. There's other things like understanding, I think a lot of it's cultural, like understanding the hierarchy, um, knowing when to speak up and say things need to be changed versus knowing, okay, this is not going to be changed and I should not bother. I'm going to look like an asshole for arguing with the producer about it. That kind of stuff you can't know until you've done it a little bit. I think also speaking Korean helps a lot. Um, so there's differences, but you know, Seoul's becoming a more cosmopolitan city every year, and they're definitely taking more stuff from foreign countries and kind of integrating it in with their own culture. So it is definitely a different style. But doing a European event is very different than doing an event in LA. There's all sorts of different things that you start to know about how like a Los Angeles production functions. That's like something that happens in Korea only, and I don't know why. I can't get anybody to bring me a coffee if I'm in a long broadcast. A lot of times, if I say can somebody get me a coffee? They'll be like, "Why didn't you bring a coffee earlier?" And I'm like, "Well, that's a good point, but I'm now stuck here, and it's been 5 hours, and I think we have another hour and a half, and you can get it, but like if I was in Los Angeles and I said I need a coffee, they just go, okay, and a coffee appears there.
Yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean? And so
funny.
there's like these
That's weird.
little, yeah, there's like these little things that shouldn't, like
Be a
if I could
problem.
just control the universe, I would fix all of it and make it perfect, but I can't. But yeah, there's all these little different things.
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, in
Yeah.
the early Korean productions, I'd be working with a staff where nobody spoke English,
Right.
and so that was daunting. Now, anytime I work anywhere, um, even though I don't need it, there's somebody who's speaks fluent English, because it's kind of understood. Of course, you'd have one person there that spoke the language of the show that's or whether the broadcast is being spoken in there.
Right, yeah. And one of the things I asked, I think it was Hajan actually. It was that the idea that the drinking culture that is in Korea, and like you have to go out whenever your bosses go out and you have to drink until they stop drinking, and that's it's cliche. Is it now? Like, is that still something that did you have to do that with the companies you worked for in Korea, or was it just kind of like the
W-
white guys go that way?
Well, first of all, it's totally true that if you're in a Korean company, you have to go drink with the boss if there's going to be drinking. I think they've actually passed a law out here that you can't go drinking with your boss more than once a week or something like
Oh,
that, because there were
okay.
some companies where like you're working with a guy who just gets hammered every night, and so he's making the staff come out.
Yeah.
People aren't seeing their families, and um, I, for the line of work that I do, I don't have. They're called hueshiks. It's like a work party. The Korean word's a hueshik. Um, I mean, we only have those at the end of at the end of a season. So so for me, I don't mind going to them because we just finished like season 3 of GSL. Let's all go get barbecue together and get soju. I know it is hard for people that don't like to drink though.
Right. Yeah.
But I would say, foreigner or not, you have to go to those. In my
Okay.
opinion, I know that some people might say in a company, you don't have to do that, but it would be wise to go and stay out with people.
Hmm. I mean, does it ever get weird though? Because isn't it also like your bosses going? Like, you ever worried that you're gonna embarrass yourself or anything?
No, well, I mean, I think I stay out of trouble, but the other thing is that culturally, I think drinking in Korea has different. How do I say this? So, like, there's a thing in America where people are supposed to drink together, but then not become too drunk,
Right.
and that is not a norm out here. So basically, Americans culturally will judge each other, even though you're both basically taking a drug, which is alcohol. So someone might like get emotional or get
Hmm.
upset. And so that's sort of, if you think about it from that respect, it's actually kind of a weird thing culturally that Americans do.
Yeah.
Or if you're feeling kind of drunk, you're not supposed to act like it unless you're with your really good friends.
Right.
But in Korea, um, first of all, a lot of conflicts are resolved over these drinking get-togethers. So like if there's like you can't like I've never seen a fight or an argument on in a production setting ever. But I've seen an argument or a fight at a Hueshik because that's the appropriate time to do it because then you have the excuse that you were drunk. And then that's where that stuff's supposed to come out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think it is to bring it back to like just the casting thing is that I think StarCraft especially is very good about always going to the hotel lobby after
Right.
the day of broadcasting for a little bit, and then at the end of the actual tournament, yeah, we all get pretty drunk, but like I think it's one of those things where it feels like you can finally like let loose and let it all out, and it's a little
Sure.
bit of like a vent, which if you're cool, like the venting can be criticizing but overall still helpful. But if you're not cool, then maybe it can be a problem, but it so far hasn't been a problem as far as I know anyways.
Well,
The
also
10 years of StarCraft
Koreans
2
do
doing
everything
this.
together. So it's
Mhm.
like when you have Americans in a bar, like let's say we finish the BlizzCon broadcast, right? We don't all drink the same drink in the bar, right? Maybe you have a beer and Dan has a glass of wine, and I have like I don't know, a gin tonic or whatever. Everybody has a different drink. In Korea, everybody has well, they don't always have a beer, but they're always taking shots of soju, right? And everybody's supposed to have them together. So you're seeing people drink all together. So if they've all drank too much, then they're all drunk. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Whereas,
well, you're all in it together on every shot. So
yeah, and you're also eating all the same food together. So it's a very
yeah,
communal thing. But I think also out in Korea, if someone were to make a fool of themselves, they just won't talk about it the next day. You're
right.
you're sort of in some kind of a weird safe zone
Mhm.
culturally when you're doing it. Now, if you were a terrible person to drink with over and over and over, then they probably I don't know what happens with that because I don't
Yeah.
like actually work in a company yet, but I would imagine there's I don't
Some
know what
drama
happens.
there.
But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still kind of funny. Like I feel like your personality also really mesh with Korea. I mean, this actually like I love this aspect of Korean culture. The idea that you can go after a show to a 7-Eleven, sit outside, and take shots until 6 in the morning if that's really what you wanted to do.
Right, right.
That's fantastic. But I think it also like in a weird way it also has imbued itself with the StarCraft 2 scene, and that we always are going after the show. If we go to Korea, Tasteless is always like, "Come with me, guys. We're gonna go to the Korean fried chicken place
Right, let's
around the
get some
corner."
fried chicken and hang out.
Yeah, exactly. And it really has created this like this level of, I guess, of camaraderie that maybe the other scenes don't necessarily have as a as a focus point, but it feels like a focus point. You know, we don't go into rehearsals and then afterwards get our notebooks and study with each other or alone. We all talk about the event while we're having drinks. So
Right.
it's kind of just this like it's part of the culture to enjoy StarCraft and the tournament we're going to cast and not bring this into suit and tie type of scenario where it's just like you show up, you do your job, and then you leave. And were you the best one or not? No, it's like everyone getting together and it's a bit of a party. So really has worked out quite well, and I think it is kind of reflecting into what you and Dan have been able to do, and with Korean culture and in Korea, like getting I think that confirmation or that experience. I don't know what to call it, but
Yeah.
it really does work quite well with esports. I think certainly it's my preference. I would hate to go into another esport and then be that weird like we're gonna go to the hotel lobby and then everyone's like, no, we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no,
Like
I'm good. And then they all go. Yeah,
this is
nobody hangs
weird.
out. Nobody has. I think also our fun is pretty tame usually too.
Yeah,
So
we're not
yeah.
super crazy.
Sorry, what were you saying?
We're not super crazy, not
No,
usually,
no.
anyways. But yeah, it's actually one of my favorite things about StarCraft. But anyway, so bring it more into casting. I mean, how important do you think it is actually? You say that you always go to these things, that you find it important to go to these things. Do you think that's the case for everyone? Like I've talked to other like Nate, for instance. One of his biggest advice to me when I first got my the WCS job that I did was actually just to like hang out with people and be casual with people and bring a good vibe to the show as opposed to thinking really hard about what I was going to say or what I was going to bring or whatever. Do you think that is the most important aspect of a show, of a cast, is that vibe?
I think the most important thing in a cast, beyond obviously like, do you know the players? Do you know the game? I mean that's obvious, right? So like
Right.
that's not even like an interesting point to point out, but like to like enjoy what you're doing. If you're enjoying what you're doing, the people that are watching it are going to enjoy it. Like occasionally if I feel like I'm not casting well, I have to think, okay, am I having fun? Because like I'm here with Dan, we usually make jokes. Like I need to figure out how to have fun. I need to figure out a reason to be excited. And I think because live TV is stressful, a lot of people end up thinking so much about what they're going to say and do that then they get up there and they're stiff as a board, and they're not having fun and they're just not exciting, to watch. So I would say, um, yeah, I think it's important to just be excited to be there and to be thinking about how you can make it entertaining. I think that's one of the key things. And I think Nate's advice is very good. I mean, the last thing you want to do is when you finish the cast, go to your room and sit and watch VODs and don't see anybody else. I mean, obviously you should review stuff, of course, but hang out with people. And you can get a lot of good feedback too from your co-hosts. Or like, I've said things I didn't think were that funny, and people think it's like the funniest thing ever. And then there's things that I thought was really funny and cool, and like nobody even remembers I did it. And I go, oh, okay. You know,
Yeah. Hey,
it-
well, do you do VOD review? Do you?
Sometimes I do. It
Mhm.
depends on. So it's kind of weird. Um, Occasionally, I'm going back over like the last like 10 years of StarCraft 2, right? I had some events that I was really stressed out at early on. Like I think since I've worked with you, you saw me probably at my best because I've been doing it for so long. Like I'm just not stressed out at events. I'm actually excited. But I've had events where like, you know, the sound we couldn't. There was an event. The most recent nightmare event I had was a BlizzCon finals where we could never get the sound right for me, so I couldn't hear Dan or he would cut in and out. And I did a finals, um, barely hearing anything Artosis said. It was my worst finals cast ever. Fucking nightmare, right? And I've been warning them for like over a week. Like, you guys got to fix this. I'm really serious. Like, this is going to be bad. I don't think people are paying attention to the cast right now, but if I can't hear what Dan's saying, it's just like I'm going to wait for my turn to talk. I might say what he just said.
Right.
Because especially early on in esports, there were a lot of sound issues. getting audio into all these different, it's going out to the stream, then it has to play on a stage, then it has to be okay in my headset for the volumes I need. Then it has to also be okay in Dan's, and there's a lot to get sorted. And so I knew that if I went back and watched my VODs where I couldn't hear myself or couldn't hear Dan and try to watch that, it would freak me out. You know what I mean? Because I would know how much I would hate how it looked, and that would be a blow to my confidence. So I've definitely had periods where I'm like, okay, I know there's if I know exactly why there's a problem, like, I once worked with a producer who just kept talking in my ear, and I was just getting thrown off, and I could feel I was getting angry. And I know I probably looked mad. This was like a long time ago, but I don't need to go back and watch that because I know what the issue was. But if it's a problem where I'm not sure, I'm like, was that as good as I thought it was, or was that not good? Then I can go back and look at it. I don't review everything that I do. What I'll do usually is like a GSL VOD. I'll click through like 5 different parts and watch for a couple minutes, or like look for a part that I remembered specifically and see how that sounded. Yeah, so that's usually how I do it if
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
review my
think
stuff.
it's similar thinking to what I have actually too. Is that I know when I make a mistake, so I don't think I need to watch a VOD to be like, oh yeah, I said that wrong, or I stuttered or something like that.
Right.
But if it was like a decent cast and I'm like, oh, I think that was all right, I'm gonna listen back, especially for things where what I'm trying to learn in these VOD reviews personally is like, am I delivering what I think I'm delivering? Because the way that we
Yeah.
sound is just like not actually what's being put out there when we open our mouth. So
Right, right.
um that's one of the biggest problems. I think that's the best thing that VOD review does is you listen back and you go, oh, that's not how I meant to phrase that or deliver that with the tone and oh,
Yeah.
okay, I get it.
Yeah, or like I've had it where I realize I think I'm like staring at the camera, but and I look like I'm there, but I actually almost have like more of a blank look on my face. And I think, oh, okay, I'm not like holding my face right. I don't know. There's
Yeah.
stuff like that. But as
Yeah.
long as I'm in the right headspace to do it, I'll do it.
Mhm, right, yes, that's the other thing is
Yeah.
that no one likes watching themselves or listening to
Yeah.
themselves really, so you do have to be in the right headspace, and, I mean, have you and Artosis ever, like, sat down together and did any conversations about your casts or, pre or post cast?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I don't think we've ever actually sat together and watched our cast together. I think that's literally never happened. But if there's something I think he needs to do or I need to do, we'll just bring it up on break. But Dan's very good at feedback. Like he doesn't take it personally and he doesn't mess him up. I've cast with people where I give him some like a little bit of feedback and I can see it like has completely ruined the rest of the show now. Is there
Yeah.
it's too much of a hit to their ego. So yeah, I mean it's usually very short and simple though, like, oh, I think you're running over me here, or you're saying
Mhm.
this, but actually that's not what that word means. It means this, or
Yeah.
something like that,
I feel like you and Artosis bring that up on the cast, though. One
Yeah,
of you
yeah,
will say
sometimes we do
something,
for sure.
and you're like, "What do you think that means?" I don't know. Anyways, it could be funny, but it's one of those things that like I don't think StarCraft 2 actually does a whole lot of is like a communal like feedback session. We have our debriefs at the end of the tournaments, but then it's usually just the producer coming in and be like, "Sorry about the sound problem. You guys did great," and then we all leave. Right? It's not really a feedback session, but it's always been the case. I think if you tackle it as something that's improving the show, it's like we're in this together type thing. It's always going to be better, but it is nonetheless awkward. I've definitely had problems with co-casters where they are definitely talking over me, or they're definitely not listening to me. I will say
Yeah,
something and they'll say the
yeah.
exact same thing, and I really have no idea how to broach that conversation. And you hear that you guys just kind of casually do it. I'm just like, must be like a relationship thing, or maybe I'm not strong enough. I don't know, man. I don't know how to
Mm,
do it.
Well, I mean, I've casted with people where like right when we're on break, I'm like, you were talking over me.
You
I'm like,
just
just
say
so
it
you
just
know,
right
like
then.
you're talking over me. You
Oh,
haven't looked at me this entire time.
mhm.
Like, this was maybe like 2 years ago. I cast with somebody, but I just said, you have to understand, you're always going to know when I'm done talking. Or like if I had a broadcast where I said, sometimes I'll ask a question out loud, and the person will think I'm asking them, and I'm like, no, 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 I'm like Why would he do that? Because he wants to do this.
Right.
But I'll say, why did I do that? And then they'll blurt out something. Go, no, no, no. So, for me, I had somebody I was casting with where I said, you need to look at me. You're gonna know when I'm done talking. I'm not just saying stuff and then I just run out and it's like you got to grab on. Like my hands are off
Yeah.
the wheel. Now you're gonna drive the car. It's not gonna be like that. But yeah, I mean, I think you got to be able to give feedback. And I think anybody who's taking the job seriously should be receptive to it. I mean, I've had feedback from people where I'm like, I don't think that's right, or I don't think I'm doing that, but okay, I'll try. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've actually gotten any during a show. I mean, it's kind of one of those general things where like, people ask me, "Have you ever gotten feedback during a show from like your director or something?" I'm like, "No," because I'm pretty sure they know that if they're going to be like, "He's not where we need to talk to you," it's already like that sinking feeling that you
well,
get when like a
also, I mean,
teacher
it's
calls you
it's
out.
it's one of these things. Like I've had it where, back when Jeff was still with us, it would be like me and Dan and Jeff, we'd be making a bunch of jokes, and then somebody thinks we need to come out there and be like, "Hey guys, you're having fun," but and it's like we know, like we're not gonna forget we're casting StarCraft, okay? Like yeah, maybe we made a joke about this for too long, okay, but we're trying to do some improv comedy here that's funny, okay? We don't your input's not it's not gonna help. Like, we'll
Right.
all realize we stayed on some dumb point for too long, or we made this thing too awkward. But that's why you're paying us is to trust us to just do this. So I don't know how other places do it. I mean, I've heard of. I mean, and again, I'm not anti-feedback, but I think the feedback has to be useful. You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. It's a big point as well as like how to get feedback and how to kind of like sift through the feedback as well is kind of difficult. Um,
Well, also, I mean, you want to be very careful about going online
right.
because then, I mean, like Reddit feedback, you can make yourself fucking crazy, and half the time they don't even get what you said right. They've never worked in production. They don't, so you got to be like I tend to just avoid online feedback almost entirely.
Right. And is that ever? I mean, so when you say that, do you really mean that? Like you've never even like looked around for like trends or like
There was
interesting
3 years I
things?
didn't open the Reddit, StarCraft
Wow.
Reddit.
Oh, okay.
I mean now I can go back there, I can check it. But I mean if there was some kind of real trend, somebody would tell me anyways, right? But um I found when I first started doing casting in StarCraft 2, there was so much feedback that I wasn't used to, and I didn't know how to parse it because I wasn't confident in my craft yet. So instead of it being like, "Oh, I can improve on this," I'm like becoming a fucking crazy person, or I'm getting anxiety, or I'm like, "Wow, people really hate me. I really tried my best there." And so it wasn't actually helpful at all.
Right, yeah. It's very difficult for I find it helpful through all the online feedback because, as you said, people don't even get it correct a lot of the time. Like, I don't know how many times I've actually gone in because it basically bothers me when it's about other casters. Of course, like, I can deal with mine and be angry, and that's fine. But when someone is like, oh, this other caster said something wrong, I'm right there, Tasteless. I am on the internet being like, okay, yeah, find the clip. Let's like
Or
dissect
I've
this. I'm
even
gonna
seen
argue with
weird
you.
stuff where like Dan says a really funny joke and everybody says that I said it, and I'm like, "What? Like, I don't think we sound that similar." And I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but usually you're not gonna get unless you're like a very very early, like you've never done any audio recordings before. Most online feedback's not that useful.
Yeah.
Like if you're a person who
Yeah.
says every other second and somebody says you say too much, okay, that's actually some good feedback. But
Mhm. Yeah, I think you can find some trends earlier on. I guess maybe you're right about that. Maybe it's one of like the things that you can do when you're newer to the craft because I feel like when I was newer, I did find some trends that I ultimately agreed with. Like a lot of it wasn't put nicely, but I was, if enough people say something, even though it's not, well executed, like it might actually be true, it's time to reevaluate. But I haven't really had that feeling in the last couple of years, basically, where I'm like, oh, the
right,
the general vibe of this community is something I need to consider. It's never really been that way. In fact, and I don't know if this is ego. I'm sure someone out there would be like, oh, it's because you have more ego and whatnot. But I actually feel like more and more, I'm like, oh, you don't understand what we're trying to do, what the director is telling us, what my focus was right there. Like you don't actually come from a place that has enough knowledge about this to actually take seriously. Where I think before it was very much like, oh, this one guy said a thing. I have to take into consideration what that guy said, plus that guy, plus that guy, plus that guy.
I
And
think
it's
also
anxiety
reading
driven.
feedback is very weird versus if you meet somebody and they give
Mm.
you feedback face to face. Like sometimes just talking to somebody, I can go, "Oh, this is a person I should take seriously or not."
Yeah.
You know, or like, I could read something that could be very hurtful, but if I saw the face and the person it was attached to, I'd be like, "Oh, I don't care."
Yeah.
It's and that's gonna sound probably kind of arrogant, but I think it is kind of true.
Yeah, it
Where,
is.
yeah,
Maynard says that like every time he reads some of these comments, he like said he like has an accent with it. I forget which accent he
yeah,
uses, but like some like southern, doofus kind of accent
hmm
where it's like, oh, he does the it's from King of the Hill. It's like, boy, I tell you what, like
oh
that type of
yeah,
accent. And when he does that, it's actually like, it doesn't because
yeah,
and this is something that just is like one of those internet things that you have to get used to, right? Like you read something in some other totally not related to this conversation at all, but one person will be like, I think, I think Trump has a correct opinion here. And you're like, well, this guy might be a smart individual who just, critically thinks on this. That's not right. Was critically
yeah.
thinking on this and maybe he has a point. And then like you click on his profile and you look at it and it's like, the rest of his comments are all like racist and like,
Right, yeah, you're like,
part of the
"Oh,
KKK,
okay,
and
this
you're just like,
person's
oh no,
completely
never mind. Like
insane."
I had to completely disregard that. All right then. So yeah, of course, fine. Hearing a tone, seeing the person, and of course for them, it's also I think the real life thing is also on the other side of things is also better, right? Where someone on the internet has just like they're not even really thinking that we're going to see this. I think how many
Oh,
times
I
have
think for
you?
sure, yeah.
Yeah, or I don't know if you did because you don't go, but I've gone to like announcement of Asus ROG, and it's like, great, cool, it's happening. And then just randomly, some guy's like, I'm so glad ZombieGrub ain't there. And I'm like, it wasn't even
Like,
fucking mentioned.
Jesus,
Like,
I have the
why?
same internet as you, man.
Yeah. So when they are forced to actually confront you as a real person, I think their feedback also gets to be a bit more pointed and actually helpful. But
Right.
of course, I think most of us are looking more towards feedback to other people, or just looking at things that we would like to copy and people that we look up to. So you said earlier on that you looked up to DJ Wheat and you actually learned a lot from him back in the early days. What did you learn from him, and what were you mostly struggling with when it came to becoming a commentator, to making a full time job? What were you trying to focus on?
So I was hired to do some StarCraft casting. I think this is my first time I worked in Korea. I did a gig like where I was here for a week long before I moved here. So the first time I was in Korea, I was actually working under DJ Weed, and I remember I was going to cast some StarCraft at this event, but it was like that would be like 2.5 hours of work, and so he had a side gig he wanted me to do, which was a camera guy who was going to follow me around, and I had a microphone, and they wanted me to just kind of be like, I'm over here. This is like a reporter, I guess, and be like, look, it's StarCraft Ghost. This is like back when they had StarCraft Ghost might come out on Xbox, and I'm like, whoa, that's so. Uh, and basically kind of run around and maybe interview some people because they needed extra content, and I was so bad. I didn't know how to do it. Like it was one of those things where like I hold the microphone and like the camera guy's walking back slowly, and I'm kind of like doing one of these reporter like, wow, we're in Korea and this is like where StarCraft really, it all started here, and we would like he would start filming me and I would start trying to do this filler thing and I would fuck up and be like, okay, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, we got to do it again because it was all B-roll, right? It's not going out live.
Right.
And I remember I tried for like an hour to do this like 60-second like off the cuff thing just to help them make content, and it was just terrible. And I eventually I looked at the camera guy. I'm like, I can't do it, man. And I was really young. I was like 20. And I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I didn't know they wanted me to do this. Like, he's like, no, it's okay, man. Don't worry. I'll just tell him, Marcus, we couldn't get anything. And then I basically that next morning I went to him and I said, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do this. If I'm not talking about if I'm not in a game, I don't know how to riff. And then he was like, tell me, he said, so he took the mic from me. He said, ask me anything. And I said, tell me about your breakfast. And he just started riffing into the camera about breakfast for like 2 minutes about what he had and why what he thought about getting McDonald's, but he didn't. And then he's like, "That's all you have to do." It's just it that might sound kinda weird, this story, but it was actually very helpful where I'm like, "Oh, I'm overthinking it."
Right.
Like, I just need to be like, "We're here in Korea. I'm actually a guy that grew up with StarCraft. I can't believe I'm here, and we're here with StarCraft Ghost, by the way, just behind me. Take a look at that. I haven't had a chance to play it yet." And you know what I'm saying? And like,
Yeah.
him showing me that was very helpful, and then also kinda just seeing how these events operate, um, and the stresses that you have occasionally with, like, production company dealing with the venue, or there's the publisher, they wanted this, and they didn't quite get it. So that was a lot of what I learned from there, but I think the biggest thing I learned from him specifically was just, "Oh, there's somebody who's doing this for a living. This content, there's an appetite for it,
Mhm.
and, maybe this is something I can do in the future."
Okay. I mean, I think that's what it really is. Usually, it's the idea of having something that's written down, and you're trying to like say it word by word, and then the difference of that and actually just like as you said, like riffing, but like just
I didn't know how to riff. I mean, the thing is,
yeah,
like, the same thing, like, with me trying to get GSL, as I said, we don't need writers.
right,
Like, we don't have time to have somebody with a teleprompter do this. We need to do this as cheaply and as quickly as possible, so we need somebody who can riff
right, yeah.
and vamp and talk and all that.
Yeah, and it does work out a bit better. I've tried doing the pre-prepared speech as well, and it just like sometimes it's okay, but usually I think it is about finding a confidence and just talking, just
Yeah, I
being
mean,
casual.
I know some people that will, like, try to really, like, have this script written out, like, especially right when, like, a cast opens, and I don't find that it's helpful. I find
Yeah.
that people trip up, and every time I feel like I've casted my best when a show opens, it's just me talking. I already know roughly what I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna figure out the right way to say it as I do it.
Yeah.
Just like when I'm casting and I'm seeing what's happening, I should kind of flow out of me correctly.
Mhm. And it sounds very unhelpful, I think, to people who are listening and being like, "Oh, I struggle to, have that confidence on camera." But it really is just about realizing that's what people want to hear anyways. If you're already commentating and now you're kind of put into this like a host role or an interview role or something like that, people just want to hear you be casual and like they just want to see you be normal. So if that's what you can do, then it is going to work out better. But telling people, "Hey, just calm down," like almost it doesn't work
I
in any
I think
context.
it's so weird to say. It's like when you don't give a fuck, it's the best. Like, I do give a
Yeah.
fuck. I do, and I am trying. But when I'm actually just relaxed and I'm kind of in the zone, I'm fine. But yeah, it's hard for people to get used to being on camera or being judged for public speaking. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's a skill you kind of build as you do it for a long time.
Yeah, and it's a skill that you build up as well, just doing whatever form of speaking you can find. I mean, if you're doing YouTube videos, then fine. If you're actually working with another co-caster to 12 people, that's also like it's all going to give you some confidence, so that hopefully when the big thing comes, when the big stage comes, I mean, it's going to be daunting at first, like it always is, but it's really not going to be that big of a deal. You know that you can do these things, and you've acquired enough experience that suddenly, when the moment comes, you're like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna say next. Okay, I'm thinking about it. I'm following through. I'm speaking while I'm thinking, and okay, there it is. I found it. I'm gonna go with it. Let's do this." Like it does happen. Because I think that a lot of people coming into esports actually come from kind of this like nerd to public speaker thing, where so many of them were like, "Oh, I was kind of shy. I didn't like public speaking." Um, and I just liked this game a lot, so I learned how to speak about it, and that's what Artosis' story is. But you and your brother Day Nine are just very outgoing people. There seems to be a bit of natural talent there. Your mother as well is a very outgoing, very nice
Yeah.
person.
Very social
So
people for sure.
yeah, exactly. I mean, did you ever like think about this? Did you and your brother ever talk about these type of stuff when he was a StarCraft 2 commentator, obviously? And how to like, bring enjoyment to the crowd, or did you not really talk about like the technical aspect?
I don't think we've ever talked about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I I when I was in college and I started realizing how much my university actually costs because I started like getting a job and being like, "Oh, how much do am I going to owe?" I realized I need to try to figure out how to get a scholarship. And so I went and convinced the school to put me on the debate team,
Oh.
and I got a half scholarship for that. But I didn't know how to do debate. And so I kind of winged that. but doing the debate stuff, I think helped me build the confidence and just sort of having to try to go up there and try to talk. So that was helpful. I think debate definitely taught me how to organize my thoughts. Or like I know when I'm actually done talking about something, I don't just kind of talk in circles about one thing. Um, and so that was quite helpful. But I don't know. I mean, when it came to StarCraft, I never felt like I wasn't confident in speaking because it was so much part of me. And this is all before there were big tournaments for StarCraft 2 or anything. I just was playing the game all the time. So I think I had a lot of confidence in that. Because like if somebody didn't like me or like who's this guy, it's like they can go fuck themselves. This is all I do is play this game. Who are they? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I feel has been a an attitude that has certainly helped more than it's ever hurt, and is consistent
Yeah.
throughout the years. I feel like I've talked to you, I've heard other people talk to you, and you just like, they're like, yeah, I heard this dissenting opinion that I think was wrong, and you don't. It's very like I don't know how to say, like, calming to talk to you, Tasteless. Like when you're just kind of like, oh, I'm kind of uncertain in my life. Like I don't know what, this one guy
Yeah, you're
said
fine. You go.
something, and I don't know. You're just like, ah, fuck that. Like do whatever, do whatever. And it's just like it's an oddly comforting thing because you are coming from such a long experience in this scene is tremendous.
I think I
So
sound like a dick when I say it though. I hope it doesn't be taken the wrong way. I'm not like
no,
I've
I don't
just
think
found that
so.
it's like thank you. Appreciate it. This is my refrigerator's behind me. It doesn't show up on my stream, but
Yeah.
when we moved here, I couldn't get the other half of my apartment. This refrigerator won't go through because the doors are made too small in this building. So like this is supposed to just be a room for streaming, but now it's also like part of the kitchen. And so my girlfriend was getting something out of there. She grabbed
Right.
me a beer too while she was doing it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, I think that people can get worked up and destroyed reading negative feedback, and sometimes the feedback's not true, and then people have sort of weird ideas about like, oh, who is this person? Why are they there? Or, I mean, so I think it's important to kind of love yourself and be confident in what you're doing, and especially not get sucked into bullshit that is not even necessarily true or especially not helpful, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's very conflicting. I feel like Jeff was also very good at this where realist really did describe him. I wouldn't say he
Yeah,
was a pessimist, but he was a realist, but it was a type of realism that gave you confidence. If he was the one being like, I don't know where StarCraft 2 is in the future, like most people would be like, oh my god, if he doesn't even know, like, oh Jesus.
yeah,
But he would say it in such a way with such, no, like, that kind of sucks. I'll be sad about it, but there's other things that are happening, and he was just extraordinarily nice to people as well. And he really sat down and talked to them. That it was this like positive realism that
right.
really was quite helpful to people who were newer to the scene, like I was. And I think you kind of have that. Sometimes in a more
Oh, thank
outrageous
you.
way because we're usually like drinking at 7-Eleven when we talk about these things, but still, like it's the same thing though, where it's like, well, I mean, this guy has done all these things and he's clearly up at the status. And if he says this thing, then, well, maybe I should stop, being so anxious about it as well. So, I mean, it's really worked out well. I just wanted to throw it in there. You definitely don't sound like a dick, at least not to me, but maybe to outsiders.
Well, thank you. I
I don't know.
occasionally, like, I'll say it, and I'll just be like, "Jesus, Nick, like, this could really sound much worse than it is." But
Nah,
I think it's sort of
nah.
like if you're a comedian, you have to know how to deal with hecklers.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you can't be trying to work the room, and then somebody goes boo, and you go like, "You don't like it? You don't think I'm funny?" You can't do that, right? It's
Yeah.
some of that is, I think, applies here as well, where it's like you're gonna have haters. You don't need to engage it. You don't need to let that rule you. I don't feel like I
Mhm.
even have a lot of haters, but I know that experience.
Right, yeah. I mean, going with the flow is very important, as a human, but also in the casting role and also in the hosting role, which, we talked about hosting, and we always use that kind of term a bit interchangeably. But when we talk about a duo cast, the host is like a leader. You actually did hosting. You did desk hosting, as far as I know, just once, right?
Right.
Um, for an IEM maybe or DreamHack, I can't remember, but it
I
was a
did
DreamHack.
two. I did one in Romania,
Oh,
and I did one in LA for the BlizzCon finals.
oh, okay,
And I think
okay,
I had been asked to do like basically what Claris does is what we're talking about when
yes.
we talk about hosting. Like they had asked me a couple times to do it, and I kept saying like I don't want to do it. I want to cast. or I would say, "Can I cast the finals?" They're like, "No, it really is a different job." Um, and so I did it the first time in Romania, and the feedback was really, really good.
Yeah.
And that was for DreamHack, and I had a lot of fun, and I felt like I was able to give the guys shit and kind of have fun with the crowd and everything. And I thought, and then they offered it. Blizzard offered it to me for the BlizzCon finals. This is like 5 years ago or 4 years ago or something like that. Um, and I said yes, and it was a total fucking nightmare because like
Oh.
they put me in the middle, and so like they had two people on my right and two people on my left, and I now if you see the way they set up hosting jobs, they're on the end of the desk, so they could see everybody. But it was like I had a PD talking in my ear, and it was like Todd wanted to talk over here, but then apparently Roddy's looking at me, and we kept having to throw to breaks, or the
Huh.
game would get delayed, and um, I didn't enjoy it at all. Like I thought I got through it, but I just thought,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not. I prefer to cast. So I
Yeah.
did do some hosting. I did try doing that for the BlizzCon finals. It was hard. I think someone like Claris is much better at it than me. But yeah, I've been offered it before, and I'm like, I really just want to just cast over this, you know?
Yeah. So that I mean, that's the main reason, but it also sounds like you had one decent experience and one terrible one.
Yeah, and the truth is that the hosting gigs are a lot of work. I mean, not that I don't want to work or anything like that, but it's like you got to open the show every break. You got to be there. You got to be there at the end. Um, and obviously that's fine, but I like kind of like really pouring a lot of energy into a cast. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like being hype in games, I guess, is what I'm getting
Yeah.
at. I would be kind of bummed out. Like I'm like, all right, well that was fun. We did a good segment, and then I got to go sit down and everybody else is casting the game, and I'm like, oh. So
Yeah.
I had a good time doing it. It was definitely a good experience as a an entertainer trying that out for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. I think the host role is very like it's like spikes. Like you have to like be
Yeah.
very, very on point for like 5 minutes and get what you want to say out there perfectly. And you can't really you can't correct mistakes as a host, which I actually have found very frustrating. Like if you're having a banter, then yeah, you can correct mistakes. But if you like throw and you're just like, we'll be right back and you mess that up, it's kind of weird to correct it afterwards. So it's very like I find it oddly stressful and yet oddly not stressful. I mean, it is definitely a different experience and a different work set preparing for that role as well. But you did do a really great job. I
Well,
don't
thank
actually
you.
remember the BlizzCon one, to be honest. I don't remember that setup at
That might be
all.
good for me then.
Yeah, actually,
Only remember my
I'm
best stuff.
yeah, I guess. Maybe I only watched the final weekend or something. I don't know. But I remember the one where like everyone was like really praising you and I thought it was a very, very good job. But then I heard that yeah, you didn't really care for the role. But with that experience, I mean, you've done a couple other esports just casually. You know, I've heard you cast in PUBG a couple months
Mhm.
ago, and there's that weird like ESG or whatever the hell that thing was called, like years and years
Oh,
ago.
ESGN.
Oh, is that what it is with, like, the
Yeah, in
booth babes,
Berlin,
like,
right? I did
holding up
Street
the
Fighter
stuff?
4 there.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
So you've done a couple different things, but,
right.
I mean, is there any thought to, like, actually, like, trying to really do another esport or expanding your roles as an entertainer to fit some other possible job?
Well, I mean, I actually was going to try to host my own little event that was gonna be like the holiday bash here, but there's COVID, so I actually had to cancel it. It would have been like 2 days from now.
Oh,
So
man.
I was gonna try to be more in charge of an event and then cast it and host it. But I mean, nobody's able to have fun right now with COVID, right? So boohoo me. But I I just did the Crossfire World Finals. Crossfire is kind of like a it's like Counter Strike but very low tier graphics. It's popular in countries like Indonesia and Egypt and Brazil where there's a lot of people that want to play esports games but they don't have higher end computers. Um I've done a bunch of different titles. I mean, there's some I definitely enjoyed more than others. I'm not against picking up any new game if I'm enjoying it, basically. So, I mean, I want to do as much StarCraft as I can for as long as I can, and so far I've kept this con going for a while. But I mean, if there's another game, like let's pretend there's some new game we don't know about that comes out and I want to do it, then yeah, I'd be open to doing that too.
Yeah. It is very much focusing on the near future, as most of us do, I think. It's
Right.
really difficult to look 3 years in the future and try and
Yeah.
guess what's
You
happening.
you kind of take it year by year and kind of see where stuff's at and yeah, I mean, I get a lot of job offers out here. I've been offered League of Legends several times to do out here. I just am not interested in the game.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I
That
could
was gonna
make
be my
good.
next question,
Yeah, I
you know?
could make good money doing it, and I've turned it down every time. There was, I think, one time I did a one-off like 9 years ago for like I think it was like a few days of League of Legends. This was again when the game was very new, like StarCraft 2. But I'm not a League guy. I don't have like any beef with the game or anything, but it's not for me. And I think there's other people out here that would do a better job than me. So I definitely turn a lot of other work down.
Okay, yeah. So it's I mean, it is available, though. You feel like your reputation precedes you type thing. You haven't actually had to go out and talk to people. They've been so far coming into your inbox. That's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, they'll
cool.
call me or so yeah, I mean, I've had other offers. I've had offers to leave Korea and go work other places too, but I like what I'm doing here now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an awesome city. I wouldn't live Korea if I could
It's a
live in
good
Korea, I
place to
wouldn't
live.
leave it.
I'm very
Yeah.
happy here.
Yeah. So did you ever like look into the technical aspects of commentary and on camera work? Did you ever work with anyone who was maybe in a more traditional side of doing it? Did you have any voice coaching or
I
any
did
like
have voice coaching.
oh yeah,
Um,
okay.
my friend who's he's a musician or he's a musician in college. He works out here as a voice actor. He helped me get my voice a little bit under control. My voice was more nasally. I don't know if I'm doing it right now because I think when I'm not casting, I think I sound a little bit different. But yeah, just getting better voice control. Other than that, I try to w- find shows where it's either like radio or like podcast, for instance, or for voice control, it'd be radio or podcast. For the way people hold themselves, I'll watch a bunch of different news shows or and just kind of see how people carry themselves. Um, Spend a lot of time on our cringe, or I used to like watching really cringy stuff happen on camera and be like, okay, how would I have handled that? But
Yeah.
no real professional help. No.
Yeah. Was there ever a phase though where you were like, I mean, what has your focus been for these GSL shows? I mean, is it like 30% technical execution, 40% having fun, and then 30% knowing the game, or is it all about just putting on a show that everyone enjoys? Did you ever try and push one particular segment? Again, like the knowledge of the game, the technical shoutcasting, or has it always been kind of just like a casual, let's bring our best energy to the show?
Well, I mean, definitely always bring the best energy. So whenever I'm doing any of these shows, I don't want people giving me bad news like right before I go live
Right.
because that can mess me up. Um, I mean, it depends on what the game gives me, right? I mean, if the game becomes very interesting and technical, then I can explore that, right? If the game becomes, and you know this for sure, like you'll have days where it's like, well, these games are very textbook. They're not extraordinary, and these are probably games I won't remember casting later, and the viewer
Mm.
might not remember watching. So then I have to figure out, okay, so is there something super meta I can talk about? Can I try to find something unique? Like think about it like this: how many times do you actually talk in one game that you cast? I don't actually know the answer, but like, is it 30 times? Is it 110 times? I don't know. But each time you talk, you better have something really fucking good or setting something up. Or when I really can't think of something, let me try to ask Dan a question. If you listen to the GSL, there's a lot of times that we'll just ask the other person a question. Do you think that I can't think of it? If there was a game in front of me, this would be easier to do. But um, you know, and try to utilize that time every time. Like there's definitely times where I see the Reaper is not going to kill a Zergling and it's going to go away. Sometimes I just don't talk about that at all.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I'll try to be funny with Dan or I'll try to talk about the history of these two players. Um, but what I'm trying to do always is use all of my energy and all of the ideas that I have inside me to make each time I talk or each time I'm doing anything that it's really contributing. Does that make sense? Like every time it's got to be something. And sometimes I pull it off and other times it's not that good, you know. But I'm always trying to do that. And so I don't break it down the way that you said where it's like is it 30% technical or 40% um this I mean, there's times where I think Dan and me we're not that funny in any part of the GSL. Like maybe we have a couple moments that we're all right, but we don't look at it and be like we were really funny today. But maybe our technical knowledge was there, or there's games where the games themselves aren't that technical.
Right.
So we try to have fun. But mostly it's about trying to get everything out of each show that we can. So if there's a delay, how do we have fun during the delay? Are the games going to be short? How do we make sure we maximize how entertaining this is in a short game? Do we have a long game? How can I make this long game exciting? What can I pay attention to? All that.
Yeah, the least amount of filler possible, the least amount of just talking because you need to talk, I
Yes.
guess.
The
Yeah.
moment I find myself, and I'll still catch myself doing it where I'm like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to be talking now, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't feel like I have anything to say. Um, I need to start figuring out how to make this interesting. Because I've definitely seen just esports casters, there's people that just think, all right, it's my turn to kind of almost like a rhythm game, like say things that happened on the screen. And then they're like, oh, hot potato, now you take it. You know, and the guy's like, oh,
Yeah.
he reloaded the gun and he did this and that. And he went to the B side and, you know, and it's like, okay, well, this isn't actually, this is like a cast for the blind or something. This
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
actually interesting.
Yeah.
And so for I know Dan and me, we try to explore ideas as much as possible, have fun, occasionally have just simple conversations. You
Yeah.
know, what did you do this week? You know, there's absolutely nothing to say. Yeah.
So how much do you think the analysis is important in a broadcast? The actual like breaking down of the build orders and showcasing what the differences are between game to game.
I think it's important. I think you got to be careful about really early on in StarCraft. I realized if I got too, and this is StarCraft 1, so this is before I was actually, but before StarCraft 2 was, we even knew it was going to be out, right? When I was picking up these tiny gigs going overseas, I would cast in front of fairly big audiences, and I would immediately see that if I got into technical jargon, their eyes would glaze over or people would leave. You would literally be casting and see people get up and fucking walk out because it's a big venue. There's other shit to do, and they clearly don't find this. They feel like this
Mhm.
cast isn't for them, right? So
Right.
if you get too caught up into technical jargon or being like, and now you know he's going to make his fourth pylon is going to go here, and you're using shorthand for a lot of the words. If you're like describing a build order, for instance, you'll find that you've excluded a huge part of the audience. And you'll find even if it's something you know really well, even pro gamers of the other races are not that interested in this part. You know?
Yeah.
So I found that if I really casted it like it was to my grandma or to somebody who just doesn't know a whole lot about games. Now I think GSL is a little bit different because it's a show that's been out for a long time, so the audience has a certain expectation, but I try to not, and actually Dan and me have talked about this with our StarCraft 1 casting, where occasionally we both, because we're both playing a lot of StarCraft 1 and streaming it right now, to like not deep dive so much that it becomes too
Mhm.
technical. Like go technical, but like don't get caught up in it.
Yeah.
Make sure that this is a cast for everybody.
That's interesting. I think most of the comments they do witness I witness a difference as well. I hear a difference between your BroodWar and your StarCraft 2 commentary. And I like both approaches perfectly fine. 'Cause I think you guys have a very good way of explaining these technical things in BroodWar. But I think most of the community looks at this and they go like, wow, you can clearly tell that they love BroodWar more. And what you're saying is that actually no, that's a problem that we're trying to pull
Yeah,
back from
we're trying
that.
to pull back. Yeah,
Oh, that's so
because
interesting.
like if you hear me talk about a PvP, I'm like literally there trying to farm the fucking builds so I can use them. So it's like,
Yeah.
and then I realized like, okay, I've actually got it. I'm casted to the point where Dan is bored with me because I'm so nerding out about this very specific thing that you would have to be a high B rank, low A rank Protoss
Right.
player, where it's like, okay, I need to explain the game in a broader sense so that everybody who's watching can appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That's very cool, actually. I mean, I think there's merits to both of them,
sure, yeah,
and that's why we usually have the analysis plus the play by play. But absolutely, there's. I mean, that is the skill. That is what makes like the pro gamer casts fun every once in a while. But if they want to become a commentator, they have to kind of work on this specific thing. Actually, that
right.
they're going too bogged down in the details, and they can't really bring any flair or break it down in a simplistic method. So that's yeah, it's definitely good occasionally, but not all the time. And kind of on that subject, actually, from BroodWar 2, StarCraft 2, and your analysis,
Right,
you were, a lot of the analysis. You literally went out there and helped the guy you didn't know Brood War as one of your first jobs. But
right.
so you were actually kind of more so the analysis, and then you got paired up with Artosis. You asked him to cast you, and you kind of just like kind of mesh into this kind of more so he was a little bit more analytical, you were a bit more play by play. Did you have any growing pains with the play by play aspect of it? Did you ever get uncomfortable being the guy who has to hype it up?
No, didn't bother me at all. I mean, I just sort of you gotta think that at the time we were potentially so boned if we didn't get this thing to work. That it was like I'll do anything to get this to work. You know what I mean? I mean, there were periods where we would cast stuff in his house online, and like one of us is observing.
Hmm.
And it's like that's also a nightmare because then you can't look at the other guy, so you don't, and you're missing
Yeah.
stuff all the time because you're observing and you're casting. Um, no, I mean we were broke in a expensive Asian megacity with so it was like whatever it took, it was going to be fine. I was never like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm really in my element here. It's like, well, just because back then it was all about survival, right? I mean, now we're comfortable, we do well for ourselves. So, I mean, now, um, I guess to answer your question, because I feel like sometimes I'm rambling a little bit here. Like, no, it was not an issue at all.
So do you ever like try and do any practice on these things? Do you ever practice your big GG finale?
No,
Do you
I've never done that. I mean, what I look at GSL it is like my dojo, right? Like that's my practice. I have a studio that I can go to that used to have an audience before COVID, but I got an audience I can practice in front of. I mean, the prep for the next cast was the last cast. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Um, the apartments out here are too small to go anywhere and scream GG without somebody calling the police. So there's nowhere to go to do that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've never, I think, like, I've never, for instance, like, put a VOD on and practiced. Like, I mute it and I'm like, all right, now that actually doesn't help me really.
Hmm. So
Um,
not even for like these other esports that you've picked up occasionally?
no,
Yeah.
no, like when I did PUBG, I just thought, okay, like, I think I know what I'm going to do. I thought my PUBG casting went well. But no, I kind of think like, all right, there's some stuff I'm thinking about. I might have some stuff like written down, like, because I always find, and it's not like here's some sentences I'm going to say. It's like a couple notes on teams, for instance, that I want to make sure I have this all in order because I haven't done this a lot, like talked about these guys a lot. But no, usually I have a little bit of prep where I think about the game a lot. I watch other casters and see what they say and see if I agree with it or not, and then I just show up and do it.
Which is very in my opinion, is very bold, but it seems to work. So I
Well,
don't
I
think
mean,
I
I've
could do
been
the
I've been
same
doing this
thing.
for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess now that I think about it, that does sound a little bit weird, but like for instance with Dan, I know he's not like practicing over a VOD or anything either. I think we just sort of feel like we can come there. And again, I think all my StarCraft casts, like when I have done other games, I think that complements my cast when I do other games. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, I think in general, any amount of speaking on a camera is going to help you in any amount of speaking on a camera on a
Right.
camera. So, yeah, I think you have experience, you have a casual approach to things that it's going to work out fine. But usually, it's like something along the lines of, "Oh, I had trouble repeating the same phrase So I made sure to kind of strike that out of my vocabulary and move on to a different phrase. Um, Uber was talking about how he practices like his because he's known for his turn of phrase, that he practices with like his friends, and sometimes it misses the mark. And then he's like, okay, don't use that one. And then he'll use the good things, on the broadcast, and his friends are his test subjects. Just like those type of things, usually what we hear from the play-by-play side of things. It's like
No,
I
I
didn't.
I don't know if my play-by-play is suffering from not doing this, but no, I just try to like if I find that also if I fuck up on the spot, that really sticks. And also if I say something that sounds really stupid, Dan's gonna make fun of me, and that's good material too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hopefully, if I'm casting, everything's clear and makes sense and is entertaining and valuable. But I don't have any kind of drills I do or anything like that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if it works, it works, right? You're still
Yeah, yeah.
considered one of the best, so
Well,
it
thank you.
works out great. All right, so we're actually closing on the end here in about 90 minutes. I got one question from
Yeah.
Patreon, actually from good old Axlav. So
Oh,
here we
excellent.
go. Yeah. How many? So this is a funny question. How many BroodWar PvT games versus Artosis would it take before it would ruin your friendship?
I think not a lot, man. Um, we actually want to do a show match eventually, but I got to catch up. He's got I had that problem with my hands and my wrists for a while. I'm able to play now, but if I get close enough to his rank, he's at like 2,150 MMR. I'm at my best account's 2,080 MMR. So if I get closer and closer to him, we'll probably do like a best of 5 or a best of 7
Hmm.
and stream it. Um, I mean, I could make Artosis hate me in one game because I could just do something so cheesy, and he seems to struggle against Protoss. But yeah, I mean, not that many, I would say.
Yeah. Actually, kind of on that, with that question, yeah, I'm thinking about the amount of streaming that you guys have been doing, which is fantastic.
Mm.
But is that something that you've really enjoyed? Do you see yourself becoming like a streamer as long as that can last, even if maybe the gigs dried up in Korea, or would you move on to a different esport if the end was nigh, if it actually happened?
So I actually am loving streaming, and I thought I would hate it. I kind of, as you know, I knew that like streaming is just something I should do. Like if I'm playing StarCraft, I should just probably stream it anyways. But I think I had a weird view. I had a shitty agent before, who kept pushing me to stream when I was doing a lot of other gigs, and I did it for a short period of time and kind of quit. I think because I didn't have the right headspace to do it at. And now that I've been doing it again, I'm really enjoying it. There's funny people that come into my channel. We get to hang out. I mean, I'm making money doing something I was going to do anyways, so that's cool. I think Dan and me like streaming more than everybody else because we've been doing so much casting. I feel like a lot of people that are streaming a lot are like, I got to get back to casting, and then because Dan and me have
Yeah.
been casting most of our careers, we're like, oh, we should be streaming more. So I like it. I mean, once I realize I'll just stream games that I want to play. I'll stream when I want to stream. Um, and like this little room here is like a little streaming studio that I've made here. I gotta put cool stuff on this bookshelf behind me, but um, look, I'm having a good time doing it. I mean, I think streaming is gonna be something I'll always do because I'm always playing games. I will tell you, I do find it hard to know when to stop streaming. Like I'll end up streaming all day and then I'll realize I haven't been out of the house. Now that's handy to do during COVID,
Right.
but it is something where I'm having to get my work life balance a little bit more sorted out. But I'm enjoying it. I like streaming.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome to hear. It's always better when people actually enjoy it, right? But
Yeah,
I'm probably one of those people where like, I think like actually, I'm trying to think of all like the StarCraft 2 commentators. I feel like actually a lot of them do either acknowledge that streaming is like the most important thing because we don't have those steady gigs, although this
right.
year is actually pretty steady. Usually we don't. And that they'll either accept that or they'll just enjoy it actually a bit more, which is definitely not me. So you're basically speaking right to me when you're like, yeah, some people, they want to do more casting. That is definitely me. Like if
Right.
I could, I would be a CS:GO caster doing, running around the world every week to a different place and just commentating. and
Right.
only streaming if I wanted to, and probably not even the game I'm casting, right? But I also had a bit of like that change of a little bit of like a different outlook on streaming when I started to stream consistently as well. As something that kind of like twisted in my brain. And I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get how this can be really fun and actually create a community and just be a place to
Yeah.
talk about really interesting things with people who also want to hear about these interesting things. So yeah, I just never feel like you guys have been casting for so long, and you've really been at the top of StarCraft 2 as well as far as commentators go. Although I think that is like it's kind of in a weird place now, not just because of COVID, but just because um I guess of the way that StarCraft 2 has panned out, I guess. Like you guys are mostly over in Korea, unfortunately. You don't get a lot of the international gigs anymore.
Right.
But regardless, like you still are, you're still viewed as the best. And I've never felt like I've gotten enough, like I came in a bit later than everyone else. And I feel like I'm just when people are like, you're ever gonna
You're
give up
still
on
hungry for
StarCraft.
more gigs and everything, right?
Exactly. I feel like
I
I
think for
haven't
me,
done
it's like
enough.
streaming's still novel, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's something kind of like, oh, isn't that funny? I can just turn on this computer and people show up, and
Yeah.
uh, any day I do it, I've paid for the food that day and saved some money, and so I'm like, how about that? Isn't that isn't that cool?
Yeah.
But I think it's also just you've been doing more online casting and working from home, and I've been doing more studio stuff. So I think there's just novelty on. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Yeah, definitely. A little bit of that for sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that it's going well, though. And of course, I hope to continue to see you both streaming and always on GSL. May it live forever.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much for doing this. I'm sorry I was a little bit late to our
no
interview
worries.
today. I because I'm not casting right now and I'm streaming every day. I don't know what day of the week it is half the time, so I got confused. I apologize for being late. Thanks for waiting around for me.
No worries. It's a weird time. It's a weird year. So just forgiveness all around. I was about to fall asleep. I'm not gonna lie. So I like wake myself up. But anyways, thank you so much for joining me, giving me 2 hours of your time. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys out there enjoyed it. So obviously, where can people find you? When do you usually stream? All that good stuff.
So, where to find me? I mean, I have a podcast I do called the Tasteless Podcast. So definitely add that. I have a new episode coming out, I think in about 24 hours with Wolf that I'm very excited for people to see. And I've got some other guests lined up. I'm going to be switching from uh, just live doing live interviews to doing online because of COVID. I've run out of guests here. And then go to twitch.tv/tasteless TV. I'm usually streaming between 1 to around 9 p.m. KST, but occasionally I've been streaming all through the night playing Cyberpunk. But I do StarCraft there and some other games, so feel free to give me a follow and come by and hang out if you can. And I don't know when GSL and ASL are going to start. They haven't told me, so I probably got maybe 2 more months off, something like that.
Something like that. We have gotten confirmation though that the GSL is happening.
It's
The
happening,
return
yeah.
of the new format for next year as well. So I
Right.
think that'll be exciting. Hopefully next year we're gonna get more and more people in in the studios if everything works out. That would be fantastic. And yeah, we'll see what happens from here. But thanks again, Tasteless, and I hope you guys out there enjoyed this podcast. And I look forward to seeing you guys for my next episode with Smix. See you later.